Streaming there. Fantastic. All right. We are good to go. All right. So we are back at it with another. We're looking at some of the deeper themes and deeper tones of what we've got going on here with Superman. And one of the things that I love about being a fan is thinking deeply about the implications of what it is that we're watching, what it is that we're consuming, what it is that we're saying, how these things are affecting us, all of those kinds of things. And this was specifically apparent when I did my episode. I don't know, a couple of months ago, talking about the different philosophies behind the different IPs and different things like that. And ever since the movie came out, there's been a lot of back and forth, um, political, liberal, from certain Christian groups, different things like that about whether or not Superman is woke, or whether or not James Gunn made him too political, or different things like that. And I think there's a lot that needs to be said about that. And so that's going to be tonight's stream, is talking about the whole idea of heroes, and this whole idea of woke and kindness, and why we it seems like we struggle sometimes with processing through, um looking at our heroes through this lens of a world where everything seems so politicized, and what it means to have um, new heroes and old fashioned morality and all of that sort of stuff. So this is going to kind of be in the same line as my philosophy of video series in Thoughts from a Bearded Geek, as well as some of the stuff in Pastor Reacts that we do on Tuesdays as well. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Just a quick note here at the top: the comment section's in, our comment section's on. Jump in. Come say hi. I do love to hear from you all. I will be reading off and engaging with any comments that come in along the way. So I want to hear from you. Also, we are extending out the usual the usual raffle deal that we have going on. So usually we've been saying that if you are following us over on one of the Twitch channels, we are currently live 3 spots on Twitch: KFM Broadcasting, Buddy Walk Pod, and Thoughts from a Bearded Geek. But also, we just started going live from the Thoughts from a Bearded Geek YouTube channel. So if you chime in, say what's up, let me know that you are tuning in from one of those locations. You will get entered in for a coupon code for the KFM Broadcasting merch shop. So we'll make sure that to get in touch about that. But leave a comment, say what's up, and all of that jazz. So I've been talking a lot about the Superman movie, because man, this movie is timely in a lot of ways, but it's just simply really good. And I've been working on some content for the character as a whole, and it got me thinking, right? Heroes in a lot of ways are cultural mirrors. what we expect from them, what we enjoy about them, what we exalt them for, or what we reject them for, tells us something about who we are and what we value at any given moment in time. And I think that's interesting, especially when you think about everything that's being said about the Big Blue Boy Scout currently. Historically, heroes, they've ranged a whole variety of different roles. You look at ancient warriors that are known as heroes, some of the saints of the faith that are exalted as heroes for one reason or another, many of them giving their lives for their faith. Rebels who rage against the machine or go against the establishment, different things like that. Lawmen who are seen as heroes, which in and of itself is its own controversial subject in today's world. And in today's polarized world, something strange seems to be taking place. Something weird seems to be taking place. It feels like kindness is being called woke. Things like compassion and inclusion and standing up for the marginalized all used to be considered heroic traits, are now framed by some, not by everybody, as being PC or having a woke tone to them. Psychologically, heroes operate on two different levels. They project strength and they embody ideals. A hero isn't just somebody that punches hard, there's somebody who punches for the right reasons. And that duality, strength plus virtue, makes them aspirational figures. Different people, though, view and value different attributes and different virtues as heroic. For some, it's courage, self sacrifice, and love. For others, it's domination and decisiveness and loyalty to a tribe or group. Heroes are kind of like Rorschach tests. What we cheer for reveals what we're afraid of, or what we want to see, or who we wish we could be, or what we value. So when a hero shows empathy, or includes outsiders, or refuses to dehumanize, they become uncomfortable for people who equal strength with aggression or purity. In insecure cultures, kindness can look like weakness. And in reactionary ones, it can look like betrayal. Now, I know I'm coming out swinging, but there's truth to what I'm saying. And then philosophically, a human is somebody, or a hero is somebody who performs a moral action in face of risk, not for their own sense of glory, but because of what is right. When we talked about Superman in the Golden Age, I mentioned the term moral absolutism. It's this idea that somebody is putting their full confidence in their sense of right and wrong. And that is what is driving them. And generally, somebody is considered heroic when they are doing something for somebody else or for the sake of what is considered right in a certain set of eyes. The truest hero acts without needing applause. That's what elevates some of the characters that we love. Superman, Spider-Man, above vigilantes or demigods. They don't save people because they're better. They save people because they believe no one is lesser. You even take somebody like Batman, right? Batman, who operates more generally out of a place of trauma than out of the same resolute nature as somebody like Superman, is still doing it out of a sense of not wanting to um, see other people go through what he went through with losing his parents. And this is some of that stuff where I think there's value in thinking deeply about the IPs that we love or what we value in different stories, because it really does act as an uncomfortable mirror to what we are thinking or what we value. Heroism is rooted in empathy and generally universal human worth. And that's generally egalitarian. That makes it politically charged in a world where hierarchies are still deeply embedded. Racial, economic, gendered norms and structures that dictate what we should or shouldn't value or who we should or shouldn't prioritize. And when a hero fights for refugees, or defends the wrongly accused, or challenges systematic injustice, that's a direct challenge to entrenched power. That's why modern kindness gets called woke. Because kindness, when applied consistently and publicly, is subversive in a lot of ways. And so we look at this term woke, right? It gets thrown around like water. And the problem is the problem is we are in a point in human history where it certain buzzwords gain traction on algorithms, and it encourages weaponizing that word. Woke is one of those words. Woke originally meant being awake to injustice, particularly racism and inequality. But over time, it was co opted and diluted and weaponized. Today, it's often used to smear or to discredit empathy based morality, especially when that morality calls for systematic change or inclusion. When a hero shows compassion towards immigrants, or questions police violence, or defends LGBTQ plus people, that's not seen as neutral anymore. That's called taking a side to a lot of people. And for critics who want heroes to affirm an older order, heroes who punch villains, not question definitions of villainy, that's threatening to the status quo. And so calling kindness woke is a way to shut down uncomfortable moral truths. It's easier to mock a hero for virtue signaling than it is to confront the idea that our systems might need moral revision. And when kindness becomes controversial, we lose something, y'all. We strip heroism of its moral depth. We reduce it to aesthetics, cool costumes, one-liners, big explosions. But real heroism is about what you stand for when it costs you something. When the chips are down, what is it that drives you? So, in a world of rising authoritarianism, growing inequality and imbalances, we need heroes who are compassionate, not just strong, but good. Not just invincible, but principled. Dismissing kindness as woke is a defense mechanism, a way for society to avoid change. But heroes have always pushed us to be better, to do better. Good heroes make us think, good stories make us question. They are supposed to discomfort the powerful and empower the powerless. Kindness isn't weak, it's disruptive. And in a culture that fears disruption, true heroism, especially the kind that centers on compassion and justice and humility and equality for everybody, will always be controversial. That's the point of a hero, to show us not just what we are, but what we could be, even when it's hard, even when it's popular, even when the popular sentiment is that anything that disrupts the power structure that currently is in place, whatever fights against the loudest voice at the table, is woke, is virtue signaling, is to be dismissed and disregarded. And the reality is, that is exactly where a lot of this is sitting right now when you look at Superman. In myth, the hero is not just strong. The hero is the embodiment of collective longing. A figure that is shaped by the values that we either admire or aspire to. Hercules, King Arthur, Gilgamesh. In a modern myth, few figures have carried the mantle as cleanly and exactly as Superman. Philosophically, Superman is built on the bones of deontological ethics. The belief that there is a right thing to do, regardless of what the consequences are. He does good not because it's going to work or because it serves his own interest, but he is resolved to doing what is good for the sake of the most amount of people. Psychologically, he represents the idealized self, a symbol of what we could be if we weren't broken, bitter, or afraid. He's not just powerful, he's gentle. He's not just an alien, he's more human than we are. And that's where I think a lot of the most ridiculous critiques of Superman come from, are the folks that have run away with this idea that he is that this movie relies too heavily on Superman's character as an immigrant. The movie, and again, spoilers, I'm not going to get as into it as I did last week, but go see the movie for yourself. This movie was amazing. The movie's depiction of Superman as an immigrant has been criticized and called woke, or promoting a pro immigrant propaganda. But this doesn't make a lot of sense because it's not propaganda. It simply portrays Superman's character in a way that's consistent with his historical portrayal. He is literally not from Earth. He is literally an alien. He is from another planet. So the criticism of the movie's portrayal of Superman's actions and status as an immigrant have been taken to a level that reflects tribalized thought more than any basis in that's in any basis of the story that's being told. It's not centered on a place that focuses on the idea of what about this subject is the movie saying. No, it's just that he's talking about this idea that even though he's not from here, he is literally an alien. And so, yeah, can you read things into it? Yeah, absolutely. But it's disingenuous to call it propaganda when you are literally talking about some of the foundational aspects of the story that's being told. And that's one of the things that really I think I find the most fascinating about this. So there are worlds, and sometimes you guys don't get to meet each other, but on this in on these streams are paired channels that I do just specifically ministry content to, and then channels that I just specifically do geek culture stuff for. But for those of you that don't know, I am a practicing pastor, and I'm somebody who I fundamentally believe that when you take things in, you need to listen to your spirit. You need to listen to what it does to you. There are some people who love horror movies. I'm one of them. There are some people who hate horror movies. They can't watch them. Okay, cool. There are some people who watch certain anime that absolutely love it. There are other ones that watch certain things and they just don't want anything to do with it. There are some movies I don't want any part of because they affect my spirit in a way that other movies or TV shows don't. But I value highly this idea of allowing stories to shape and challenge and affect how we process the world and how we think about certain things, and to think deeply and critically about these different things. And one of the things that drives me nuts is I know other Christian content creators that are in the comic space, that are in the superhero space, that are in the geek culture space, that have 100% turned their nose up to this movie and this version of the movie as if they've never read a comic before, as if they know nothing about Superman's story. They just um they are regurgitating the talking points. They're regurgitating everything that they hear from their news media sites and their echo chambers, and are demonizing some of the core aspects of this that I'm like, these are some of the story beats of Christianity. Yeah, Christians did it first. Yes, the guys when they made Superman, they were Jewish, and they created him to be a Moses figure. There are tons of biblical concepts all over Superman, but because it's portrayed in a certain light, those character attributes are vilified. They are not okay. And that sort of thing drives me nuts because I don't know, have a consistency. Like have a consistent thought as far as that goes. Don't allow yourself to get swept up in the shifting sands of the political landscape as it currently sits. You know what I mean? And when we look at this term woke, it's when used to describe this version of Superman, it's a meaningless statement. They don't have there's no coherent definition of the term. It's become catch-all. And the quantities rather the qualities that are being labeled woke in this movie, such as Superman's dedication to preserving life, Superman's dedication to protecting civilians, aren't unique to this film. They've been part of the character's personality throughout his entire history. That's part of the reason why movies like Man of Steel were as divisive as they were, because those were the very character attributes that weren't present in that version of the character. And people were pissed off about the fact that they weren't present in that version of the character. And so a lot of people said that wasn't their Superman and all of that. I'm just saying, like, it is at 100% a moving goalpost. Superman's efforts to protect people and animals during this movie, including rescuing a dog, rescuing a squirrel from a kaiju who he also tried to either rescue or humanely put down as best he could, were seen as offensive to some people who don't like his commitment to preserving life. And the film also touches on a conflict between two fictional countries, Boravia and Jaranpur, and has been criticized as being pro-Palestine through this aspect of the plot. And the issue is, though, that that's not like outrightly said. It's read into. Again, all of these things are a mirror. The story of Boravia and Jaranpur in this movie can be seen as an allegory for Israel and Palestine. Or I think I said Palestine twice. Anyway, with Boravia being a militarily superior nation and Jaranpur being a weaker and more impoverished country. And Superman's intervention to stop the Boravian military from invading Jaranpur can be interpreted as a reference to this conflict. The movie's portrayal of Superman's actions can be seen as as a strong country invading a vulnerable country for dubious reasons. And Superman's decision to intervene raises questions about the geopolitical wisdom of his actions and whether or superpowered individuals should interfere in the affairs of sovereign nations. That the issue though is that those aren't the only parallels that can be drawn. The parallels between Boravia and Jaranpur and other real world conflicts can also be turned to Russia and Ukraine. And so when you look at the sum total of this story, we have to be honest about what are we getting mad about? Like what why do we think that this is offensive? Or why do we think that this is um woke? And I think the reality is And this, from the Christian perspective, goes to an entirely different and deeper level when you start talking about the Israel and Palestine things and dispensationalism and Israel and standing with Israel and all of those kinds of things, which is a theological landmine, or minefield rather, that I don't care to get into right at this moment. But suffice it to say, I don't think it's a proper articulation of the concept to just uniformly say we sweep one whole group's actions under the rug because of the way that somebody decided to interpret scripture. And so when you look at Superman as an immigrant and a refugee, having been forced to leave his birthplace due to larger circumstances, and this aspect of his character delivering a broader message about tolerance and acceptance, you have to look at it. Well, it just seems obvious to me that it becomes clear that it's more about judging people by their actions rather than by their heritage. The movie portrays Superman's story as one of assimilation into his new culture, where he rejects his Kryptonian parents' intentions for him to rule over Earth instead of choosing to live as he always has been, which could be seen as a moral minority assimilating into his new culture. So I don't know what those that are looking at that as bad are getting upset about, because if anything, he is throwing off his other identity. And then you get to the character of Lex Luthor, who's portrayed as bitter and resentful and abusive and egotistical, willing to threaten the entire world for his own ego driven purposes. And his portrayal may be problematic for some viewers who have seen similarities between his character and their own beliefs and values. Lex Luthor's character is also notable because he's a projection of his own bigotry and fear and ignorance, which is analogous to how some folks react to things that they perceive as woke or prejudice. The movie's portrayal of Superman as an immigrant hero and Lex as a villain who demonizes immigrants can be seen as a commentary on real world issues, with some people maybe feeling called out because they may feel reflected in some of the character's actions or beliefs. See, the character of Lex Luthor is used to critique certain ideologies or behaviors, things like misogyny and narcissism and a callous disregard for life, which may be uncomfortable for some who see themselves or their heroes in his character. See, the reaction to calls for tolerance and inclusion, or the depiction of diversity, oftentimes is met with hostility and insecurity by those who oppose the idea of being woke, or since they feel insulted or attacked, which isn't the intention. But some people assume this movie with pro-immigrant content would be a lecture due to their own inability to tell a story with political themes without being heavy-handed. And this assumption is proven wrong, since the movie opened to huge box office grosses and positive word of mouth. The movie's message promotes kindness and honesty and compassion and humanity and respect for others, which is not a new concept for Superman. And it's not pushy or lecturing or preaching. And some have rejected this movie for not being faithful to the comic books, but this criticism isn't founded, since there have been many excellent adaptations that have diverged from the source material, and the movie should be judged on its own merits, not how faithful it is to any one comic book story, because comics change. Comic canon changes all the time. And the movie's depiction of Superman is actually pretty close to the actual comic book depiction. And those who claim that it's not faithful to the character need to read some of the earlier issues of Action Comics, where Superman takes crooked mine owners and war profiteers and shows them a version of justice. A scene in the movie where Superman calls a robot by its preferred name, Gary, is an example of basic respect and kindness. And it's not necessarily surprising, unfortunately, that this is seen as a big deal, since it's been hijacked by people who have very specific opinions or very specific values. The idea that being kind or respectful or empathetic is woke is a misconception and is using one's power and influence to prevent harm and show emotions, and trying to say that that's weak, but it doesn't make somebody weak. The notion that Superman strives to be kind and compassionate raises questions about whether this trait makes him appear soft, and this perception is worth examining. The idea that cruelty is regarded as a virtue is concerning, as it implies a shift in societal values that prioritizes harshness over empathy. The fact that Superman being woke is even noteworthy is a problem. It suggests that living in a world where kindness and compassion are valued is not the norm, but rather an exception that warrants some kind of special attention. He saves people who hate him. He holds back his power when he could dominate. He chooses to serve when he could rule. In a world that worships dominance, this makes him feel suspicious. The question I have is, what if you were the person that was on the receiving end of whatever power dynamic was being exploited at that time? What if you were the person who was forced into an illegal prison? What if you were the person that was forced into a situation just based off of what you look like, with no regard of who you are as a human being? So, in our current climate and culture, it's fragmented by cynicism and exhausted by outrage and addicted to stances. And to all of that, idealism reads as a threat. We have been fed a steady diet of anti-heroes and gritty realism for decades now. Characters like Walter White, Homelander, Omni-Man are praised for their complexity, but they also reflect a worldview where brutality is honest and kindness is fake. Superman's restraint and compassion seem simplistic to people trained to expect darkness. If he's not conflicted, is he even real? If he cares about everything, he must be pushing an agenda. Psychologically, a culture that's experienced collective trauma, wars, pandemics, economic instability, political division. For those of you that are of the millennial persuasion, you know that we have been fending off near-death experiences and traumatic issues since 2001. Actually, no, sorry, since 1999 with Columbine in UK or in Y2K. Those are the ones that I can point back to. For the classically millennial group, there's plenty of other examples, and they keep going past that point. But a lot about the world changed then. And you can feel free to correct me with ones that are earlier and whatever the case may be. But when you get a lot earlier than that and being aware of them enough, that's when you start to get into the Gen X world and all of that. But we've been fending off world-ending events for a long time now, and it tends to harden people. We turn inward. We become tribalized. And that mindset, empathy, feels weak and unsafe. It feels vulnerable in a world that it doesn't seem safe to be vulnerable in, like letting your guard down. So when Superman says hope, some hear soft, some hear weak, some hear untrustworthy. When he protects immigrants and the oppressed, some say he's gone political. What's truly disconcerting to me are some of my brothers and sisters in the faith that do not fundamentally see the influence that the people of God have had on Superman's ideas of standing up for the marginalized and the oppressed. But what they're really reacting to is the discomfort of seeing somebody better than we feel capable of being. We feel exposed. And this is where the woke label comes in. Acts of compassion, defending the marginalized, refusing vengeance, speaking gently, are now coded as progressive or partisan. But Superman did these things long before the culture war vocabulary even existed. Go see my video on Golden Age Superman. He was created by Jewish immigrants in the 1930s as a champion of the weak. He fought corrupt landlords, abusive husbands, and Nazis before America joined the war. He saved everyone. Every time. Even villains. Because he believed that nobody was beyond hope. For anybody watching that is of the Christian persuasion, does that sound familiar? I'm just saying. His values aren't political, they're moral, but we've lost the ability to separate those things. When we reject the ideal hero, we're not just choosing darker stories, we're giving up on something essential. Hope as a force, compassion as a form of strength, meekness as a value, the belief that power can serve rather than exploit. Take it from somebody who struggles with cynicism. Cynicism is safe. It's easier to believe everyone is selfish than to be vulnerable enough to hope for more. But rejecting Superman says more about us than it does about him. The argument that Superman is unrealistic misses the point. So is any myth. He's an American myth. He is a fictitious character. But the values aren't fictitious. The standards aren't fictitious. The point of view isn't fictitious. The argument stands on the shoulders of something deeper. He's not there to reflect who we are. He's there to remind us who we could be. Philosophers like Plato, Kant, and even Simon Weil saw moral goodness as something transcendent, not common, not easy, but necessary for holding society together. Superman is that platonic form made flesh in spandex, underwear on the outside, and a cape. In a world that has forgotten how to believe in goodness without irony, Superman is a rebellion. Kindness is punk rock. It's not a rebellion against realism, but against fatalism. Superman isn't woke, he's decent. And in an age where decency feels like disruption, maybe we need that character now more than ever. Maybe we need to take a look at ourselves. Maybe we need to take a look at society and the values and virtues of society. Because I'll take this from the Christian point of view. We're still in this. We're still in the world. Yeah, we look at myths and we can say, okay, this part comes from this and this part comes from that and all this sort of stuff. And the things that we believe run at a deeper level than what we think about Superman. But they are absolutely reflected in what we think about a character like Superman, or what we value in this world, or what we prioritize in this world. All of those things matter. And so regardless of whether or not you're looking at this from secular or sacred, whether you're looking at this from right or left or somewhere in between, these conversations still matter because they speak to us at a human level. Once upon a time, hero meant standing up for the little guy. It meant protecting the innocent, sacrificing your own desires, and holding yourself to a moral standard above the world's chaos. Today, you'll hear it online. They made this character woke. This show is too much of a message. Why can't they just tell a normal story? It's become a catch-all insult for anything involving empathy or diversity or moral conviction. The heroes, by definition, embody moral conviction. That's why they become targets. When heroes were mostly straight white men saving the world with American flags, that was considered neutral. Now that we have heroes that are black or women or Muslim or queer or immigrant coded, people cry agenda. But friends, representation isn't an agenda. It's reality. You can agree with whatever you agree with or disagree with whatever you agree with. You can have whatever stance there is in the world. But these IPs and these franchises aren't dedicated to only showcasing one specific point of view. And in a world of diversity, and in a country that's supposed to be this melting pot, that's supposed to be like based on diversity, are we really going to get hot about the fact that different people can have somebody that looks like them on the screen? Is that really that bad? Nobody's holding a gun to your head and saying that you have to believe everything that they're saying or stand for everything that they stand for. Nobody's saying that. But what does it hurt to have that person on the screen? And what does that say about you that you think that it's an agenda? And I'll be honest, for as liberal as I sound right now, and by all standards and measurements, societally, sociologically, I am as liberal as I have ever been. Theologically, I like to believe that I am still pretty conservative, but depends on who you ask, really. I used to struggle with this. Just between you, me, and the wall. It was my wife who taught me how to love. It was my wife who taught me how to care for other people. That's why literally every single time that it is said about me, and I'm not sitting here trying to break my arm and all of that sort of stuff. I'm trying to be honest about the fact that it has been said more than once that I am unwilling to walk past the person that other people will walk past. And you don't get that. You don't get this. You don't get me spouting this stuff off without my wife showing me what it means to love. What it means to love, regardless of stance, regardless of anything, regardless of anything that I agree with or disagree with. And that is the human person that took the nugget of image bearer, imago Dei, image of God language, and pushed that forward and cultivated that and helped me see and realize what that means. And so when I say words like you, I'm saying that at a uniquely human level. I'm not trying to be a jerk and I'm not trying to point fingers outward. I'm speaking from a personal experience of somebody who has changed their tune. If you would have heard me in, I don't know, 2019, I wouldn't have sounded like this. I would have sounded way more classically Christian in the American evangelical sense. Diversity in storytelling doesn't make a character woke. It makes them honest. And many modern heroes question governments and systems. They confront systematic injustice or deal with trauma and grief and generational scars. Older media often skipped the nuance and just said, punch the bad guy, that'll do it. Today's stories ask, why is there a bad guy in the first place? What systems created him? And what happens after we win? That complexity gets misread as softness or politics, when in all actuality, it's a reflection of moral depth. See, we live in a world that's saturated by hot takes, social media outrage, think pieces, people who have access to a mic and start spouting off video essays all willy-nilly. Yes, I'm being self-referential. Yes, I am making fun of myself. For anybody who didn't get the joke, yes, I am making fun of myself. So when a superhero movie even brushes against social issues, it gets accused of preaching, even if it's doing what art has always done, reflecting the times. If Superman defends refugees, or Captain Marvel talks about being gaslit, or Miles Morales represents cultural hybridity, it's not propaganda, it's storytelling that's rooted in a particular POV. Psychologically, people equate the way things were with safety. When the face of a hero changes, or when the story focuses on systematic wrongs that target what used to be considered normative, it feels like an attack on the viewer's identity, even if it's not. That defensiveness turns into criticism masked as moral concern or moral majority. They're ruining heroes by making them about politics. But heroes have always been political. Captain America literally punched Hitler on the cover of a comic, y'all. That literally happened. Superheroes on both sides of the fence were literally wartime propaganda during World War II. It's literally a thing. I promise you, it happened. There's a whole era of Superman. For anybody who hasn't already heard this, truth, justice, in the American way literally was what the catchphrase was. There's a reason, though, why it changed from truth, justice, in the American way to truth, and justice for all. So when we look at modern audiences, we have to admit that modern audiences are used to things like sarcasm or anti-heroes or emotional distance. Characters who show earnest care or hope or moral clarity. Think Sam Wilson's Captain America, Kamala Khan, classic Superman, Black Panther. They feel strange, too sincere, too optimistic. And so they get labeled as woke instead of what they really are, unapologetically good or unapologetically what they're standing for. This is where it gets deep. The modern backlash against woke heroes isn't about politics. It's about the kind of things that we value. In older, often patriarchal frameworks, power is dominance. Heroes defeat conquerors. In modern stories, power is restraint. The hero protects, questions, and uplifts. We're in a cultural transition between the Nietzschean Übermensch, the power as will, and a more humanist archetype, power as service. Transitions always provoke resistance. We hate what reminds us of what we should be, but aren't willing to become. When someone says that hero is too woke, what they might mean is they're not like the heroes I grew up with. They're not like the stories I remember. They're making me uncomfortable with how the world is changing. They're talking about things I've never had to think about. They're calling things wrong that never used to be wrong. They don't have a sense of humor anymore. That discomfort is part of growth. It's part of what humans are meant to do: inspire, challenge, reveal. So heroes aren't becoming woke, they're becoming real. They're mirroring the complexity of the world that we live in, that we've always lived in: the pain, the diversity, the systemic issues, the hope. And if that feels uncomfortable, maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's exactly what it's trying to do, is help you think past what you're used to. That's what these stories are meant to do, is to push us and to look into ourselves, to be willing to examine who we are, what we stand for, what we're saying, what we're willing to do, what we call is right, what we call is wrong. That's what a hero like Superman does. He shows us the ability that we can be better than what we are. He shows us what hope looks like. He shows us what genuine compassion looks like. And that's a beautiful thing, that we have stories that reflect those aspects of humanity. And once upon a time, those aspects of humanity were exactly what was valued. That was considered the strength. That was considered the norm. That was considered what was good. And the question becomes, is it woke to use one's power and influence to try and prevent the slaughter of innocent or vastly unmatched people? Does the fact that he smiles and cries and gets frustrated and gets angry and cares about a dog and flips out over trying to save a dog and generally shows his emotions make this Superman weak? See, the funny thing that I find about the whole dog thing is another character who is a lot more morally gray freaked out and killed like 100 people or some nonsense like that. I don't know. I didn't watch those movies, but had absurd amount of killing over a dog. And everybody's like talking about John Wick like he's the next best thing. Like, oh yeah, I would do that over my animal. Well, you got Superman who cares about crypto, but he's woke. And I'm not even strawmanning here. I know for a fact some of those people that heralded John Wick as a good movie aren't cool with Superman showcasing some of the same emotion, it's a moving goalpost. It's shifting because it's not set in stone. Because these are showcasing attributes of the individual more so than actual characteristics of the character themselves. Have we come to value stoicism too much? Does the fact that he strived to be kind and compassionate make him soft? Or have we become convinced to regard cruelty as a virtue? The problem isn't Superman is woke. The problem is we live in a world where that fact is even worth mentioning, where his kindness and propensity for defending the marginalized and the weak even has to be called into question. That's the problem. So that's it. That's all. That's a wrap. Y'all, I love coming on to the show and talking about these things. What I want you to do is do me a favor. So, couple of things, couple of reminders. If you chime in from Twitch and let me know which Twitch channel you're watching from, and you know, you get in touch and all that, we will get in touch with you'll be entered into a coupon code for the KFM Broadcasting merch store. Same thing with the Thoughts from a Bearded Geek YouTube channel. If you chime in the comments and let me know, hey, watching from here, we'll get in touch and you'll be entered into that as well. We are trying to grow those channels, so if you are watching on one of the other platforms, go ahead and check us out over there. Also, if you would do me the favor, let me know what else you want me to cover. I love talking about these philosophical and psychological deep dives. It gives me a chance to use my training in a way that marries some of my loves together. It helps me take my pastoral training, my counseling training, my psych training, all of that stuff, and kind of bring it together for in a holistic package for you all. So I don't know if we're going to keep covering Superman. I've been hearing a lot about the whole woke nonsense and all of that. And so that was a big reason why I wanted to talk about heroes being called woke and Superman being called woke. But let me know what other characters you want to hear me talk about and do these kinds of deep dives and these kinds of retrospectives on different things like that. What other topics you want to hear me cover. But that's it for now. I will be back live next Tuesday with another episode. But for now, peace.